Andrew, I heard you earlier this week talking about Isaiah Augustave, as you were just mentioning, and one of the things that stand out is where he's at, Naples, Florida. Arkansas has shown the ability to go into Georgia, to go into Florida, go into Missouri, go to Oklahoma and Texas. What have you thought about Sam Pittman and his staff, not just getting kids in-state, but guys from out of way committed to this point?
Well, I mean, I think Sam Pittman, I mean, when he was at Georgia, we knew he was a good recruiter when it came to offensive linemen. I think we maybe weren't sure what he would do as a head coach running his own program, but he has shown that he's not afraid to go anywhere around the country to get top talent. And, Arkansas has been pretty active in the state of Florida and Georgia. I think what they've done in Georgia the past few cycles is just as impressive. So I think it's just a kudos to him. I mean, he's going to do whatever it takes to get that roster better. And he knows states like Florida and Georgia, they produce talent, same with Texas. And he's trying to make Arkansas kind of a little national brand and get some staying power in the Sunshine State.
Andrew, Arkansas right now has 22 commits. I want to say that's third, following two schools. What does that mean for this football program and recruiting? Is that a big deal, or are we making too much out of that at this point?
I think to me, when we see these commit lists right now, and everyone around the country, these different schools seem to be kind of in different places in terms of where they are in assembling their recruiting classes. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we didn't have summer official visits. This was a time when it was all about the summer camps, but things have been so accelerated with those official visits that so many schools are trying to grab what they can, and then they can lock into their fall camp and see what happens, what shakes free come late November, early December when the coaching carousel kicks up, and then you got the early signing period. To me, when I see 22 commits on Arkansas's commit list, that to me shows that they know what they want. They've developed relationships with these kids, and they've got them committed. And now it kind of turns to, hey, we're gonna play our season. You're gonna play your season. And I think Arkansas is anticipating having a good year. So you would think most of these kids are going to stay committed. But again, it circles back to the relationship building process, and then again, knowing what you want to do from an evaluation standpoint, going and finding the guys that you want in your program. I think Arkansas has done a really, really good job of that in the 2023 cycle.
Andrew, I think one thing this fan base and this coaching staff as well would take pride in is a top 10 class when all the dust settles, primarily in December, but I guess officially in February. What has to happen with a handful of slots you've kind of got left, and kind of globally, the 10,000-foot view with Alabama and other schools? What has to fit in right the rest of the way for Arkansas to end up in that top 10 kind of consensus class ranking?
Well, they're going to have to win some battles, kind of win some of the guys that are still left on the board for them. Marquise Deal, a big two-way lineman out of the state of Texas. He would certainly help that class ranking stay high. I mean, at the end of the day, I think you got to realize, Bama's going to get theirs, Georgia's going to get theirs as well, and then with Texas A&M, they're lurking back in the 40s or 50s right now. So, to me, I don't think the focus is going to be, or should the expectation should be that this is a top 10 class. Maybe this is another top 25 class. I think when you look back to what Arkansas did in the 2022 cycle, they finished 22nd overall, right? And more importantly, they finished 10th in transfers. And, that's got to be becoming the formula in big time college football. You also got to find some guys that can fill gaps and be 1 and 2 year rentals. And I think what Arkansas did in the portal was impressive. I would anticipate them maybe getting back into the portal in this 2023 cycle. So I don't know if it's going to be a top 10 class. That might not be obtainable just when you kind of crunch the numbers, but to me, at the end of the day, the name of the game is stacking back-to-back, fruitful recruiting classes. And when I look at what Arkansas did in 22, what they're doing in 23, I think they're going to do just that. I mean, heck, I was out at the All-American Bowl back in January, and Arkansas had 4 guys there. I think the average college football fan would be a little surprised that Arkansas had 4 commits or signees at the nation's premier All-Star game. So I think that's been super impressive, just what Pittman is able to do in such a short amount of time.
Andrew, you mentioned Texas A&M and down there in the 40s. What do you think the future looks like, and what's happening now kind of at ground zero in Texas with the Longhorns coming into the SEC in a couple of years, A&M trying to be the flagship football program of that state? What are the recruiting battles like now? And what are they going to become like in the state of Texas with those two SEC schools butting heads daily there?
Well, I keep bringing up this example when people talk about conference expansion and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, Texas is obviously a national brand. It's a big-time brand. But, I'm a guy that's based in South Florida. And, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I can't remember Texas A&M ever coming into Miami-Dade County or Broward County, that Fort Lauderdale metro, and trying to get some of these big-time recruits. But they make the move to the SEC. They play in an Orange Bowl. They're on TV a little bit more. And then this past cycle, they go down and they land a Shamar Stewart, who is a 5-star pass rusher. They're making a run at a 5-star wide receiver from down here. So, obviously NIL has changed the recruiting landscape a little bit, but I think when you look at this conference expansion, schools are kind of expanding their footprint, and kids are going to relate to them a little bit more. So I think, that Texas is getting a bump from that. I think Arch Manning's also one of the most popular recruits ever. I think the average 16, 17, 18-year-old knows his name, and they want to go play with him. So it'll be interesting with that tug and pull. I mean, I wouldn't rule out Texas A&M making a run at some point. They seem to still be a little limited when it comes to numbers, but they're going to have a good class under Jimbo Fisher. He was brought to Texas A&M to recruit at a high level, and we saw him do that in the 2022 cycle.
Andrew, to that point about Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M, they have recruited in a lot of different areas. They've had studs all over the field. I think about Aniyah Smith back this year, Myles Garrett. Christian Kirk still gives me nightmares after that kickoff return against Arkansas. But the one position that he has not recruited and developed is quarterback. Kellen Mond was not his recruit. Had a great season under Jimbo in his final year, but the quarterback has been an issue for them, which is after Jameis and Florida State. Never would have thought that. Why hasn't that panned out to this point? And are you a believer in what Max Johnson could potentially do in College Station this year?
Well, that's the guy I was going to bring up is Max Johnson, kind of as the not wild card, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get into October, late September, and he's kind of the guy for the Aggies. Jimbo, as much. I don't want to say. I used to kind of refer to him as a QB whisperer. I mean, look what he did at Florida State. He had that stretch where it was Christian Ponder, E.J. Manuel, and then he kind of ran into some lumps at the tail end of his tenure with the Seminoles. I mean, I think he's got it figured out, or he's got enough. I love to use this term, bullets, to eventually figure it out. I mean, Connor Wegman, who was a 5-star, he signed in the 2022 cycle. I'm a big believer in him. I like that kid's release. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the 2023 cycle, because they don't have a quarterback committed right now. They had one, Eli Holstein, who ended up flipping to Alabama. So, I think Jimbo will figure it out. But man, when you talk Texas A&M, that front seven is where I think the strength of the program is going to be over the next few years, because that defensive line class they signed is probably going to be one of the best ever when we look back on it in a few years.
Andrew, on the subject of quarterbacks, let's go to the high school ranks. You were talking about Arch Manning, a guy that will play in the SEC for the Tennessee Volunteers, it looks like, and you're going to have to help me with his last name. Nico Ilmueva, is that how you say it?
Iamaleava.
I
only know that because he was down in Miami at a camp back in January. I watched him play one 7-on-7 game. I said, this is one of the best arms I've ever seen. I said, I'm going to be saying your name a lot on the radio and TV over the next year, so I need you to coach me up. So we spent 5 minutes coaching it up. So it's Iamaleava.
Iamaleava, okay. And I know that he is going to be getting a considerable amount of NIL money in Knoxville, and they're excited about them. They should be. He's a really talented player. Just heard what your evaluation of his outstanding arm. I do wonder, when you talk to kids in the recruiting process, how high up is money and NIL on the list? Because we know it wasn't even a thing a little more than a year ago. How much has that moved to a forefront of the conversation to recruiting where young men are going to decide where they're going to go to school?
I think if we're being honest, it's a huge thing, and maybe I don't hear it from the kids, but you talk with your college contacts, the coaches. I mean, a lot of these kids, they go on their visits, whether that be an official visit or an unofficial visit, and they want to hear about NIL. What potential opportunities do you have for me? And this is not even at the highest of the levels, the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world. I mean, one of my good friends is at a group of 5 school in the recruiting department, and they hosted a transfer, and this kid wanted to sit down with some NIL people in compliance. So, I mean, everyone's thinking about it, and you kind of ask around what's going to happen, I think, long term, and I think they're eventually going to have to kind of get some guidelines and regulations on it. But, I mean, if we're being honest right now, I think NIL is more important than facilities. I think the landscape has changed a little bit. We'll see if it sticks, but right now you better have a collective and you better have your ducks in order, because these kids are coming on visits, and the photo shoots are still important, but I don't think they really care about the weight room or anything right now. They want to hear, hey, what can you do for me in terms of off the field stuff when it comes to a monetary value, and that's just the nature of the beast right now.
Andrew, let me ask you this last question to kind of top it off. I'm assuming that you're not making 7 figures for 247 Sports, but you love your job. And maybe it's something you've been doing for a while. Maybe it's something you just got into. I know Tommy and I aren't making 7 figures, but we love our job. And there's not a lot of other things I'd like to be doing right now than sports talk radio in Arkansas. So and again, I have not been through this recruiting process. I've been through the job process. I could have taken another job, made more money. And you mentioned that how much that's gone to the front of the discussion. How do we get young men to understand that not that money's a bad thing. Like, I want to make money. I'm not doing this for free. You're not doing this for free. But are we really wanting this sport to become, well, if the money is the end all be all? Because you're not doing it because of the money. Tommy and I aren't doing it because of the money. How do we combine without making the money the biggest issue? And I guess that's where we'll end it here.
Yeah, so I was having a conversation over the weekend with actually a all Big Ten player who happened to be at that camp I was at. He was hanging out, and he had a few NIL deals, and I was kind of picking his brain and asking him about that, just the landscape of a locker room, because, I think 2 years ago, no one was making money, and now some of these guys are making more money than others, and we're just kind of talking, and his stance was interesting. He's a kid that doesn't come from much of any money, and, I asked him about, hey, did schools try to get you in the transfer portal? And he said, yeah, but at the end of the day, he said it comes down to relationships. That's why he's staying at the school he's at. And he wants to get developed and reach the league. I think this market is eventually going to correct itself, and I know some people have the other opinion, but I don't think the average booster or the average season ticket holder realizes how much of a bust rate there is at all levels of football, not just college football, but in the NFL. There's guys that are drafted in the first round every year that 3 years later they end up somewhere else. And I think that's going to happen in college football. I think someone's going to be sitting up in the press box and their wife next to them and be like, why are we paying all this money for this kid that's on the sideline? So I think there's going to be a self-correction, and I think at some point people are going to have to realize, man, it comes back to player development, getting an education, and then realizing that the real money is probably in the NFL on Sunday. So, and I'm all for guys getting paid and different NIL deals and all that stuff, but I think we just got to weather the storm maybe for another year, and that's not even my take. I've heard that from college coaches, and this will all kind of sort itself out.
Partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's Wimbledon Finals, Major League Baseball, the latest fighting news, and even next season's early NFL futures. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV to get the bonus and get into the action. Bet online, where the game starts.